All right, good morning, good morning. It looks like we are live. I can see there's a couple of us who've already joined. So welcome Aaron and welcome Intabi Singh. Looks like we are good to go. I'm just typing a message in the chat. So as you join, if you could please let us know your role and organization. Let me just type that in here so you can see it as well. And it's great to have you here this morning. I think there's definitely some uplifted spirits. Looks like spring and summer are well on their way. The woes of winter are over, and it's really, really great to have everybody here this morning. We're in for a real treat today. We've got one of our long-standing partners of the CHRO community who's joining us for this really impactful and insightful session. We're going to be partnering with Oracle on this webinar. And today we'll be discussing a whole range of things as it relates to the HR space. So we'll be looking at how technology can make our HR function perform better and perform a bit more humanly. And Rob's going to be sharing some really cool insights with us around how we can create and ensure that we have an organization that is full of empathy, resilience, and innovation. So once again, as you join the session, please let us know your role and organization. Put that in the chat for us. And it helps if you spell correctly as well. Okay, there we go. Excellent. So let's see, wait for a couple of responses. Let me know that you can hear us okay. Excellent, good, looks like you can. Great, so this morning we'll be doing the session in two parts. As you know from attending our sessions in the past, we like to keep the sessions very interactive and very engaging as well. So during our session here today, if you have any sort of questions or comments that you'd like to share, please go ahead and type them in the chat. And if we don't get around to answering them in the live Q&A, in the last 10 minutes of our webinar here today, we'll be sure to reach out to you personally to answer some of those questions or some of those concerns as it relates to tech in the HR space. Our first presenter this morning is going to be Rob Bothma. He's got over 20 years experience working in the HR field. He's a business solutions architect for Oracle, and he's going to be taking us on a journey on the expert's guide to empathy, resilience, and innovation. Shortly after Rob's presentation, we'll be opening up the floor where we'll be doing a mini sort of Q&A and panel discussion with Queen Mokonoto, who's the HR director at Oracle, and Ronnie Turin, who's the HCM sales development and strategy leader. So looking forward to connecting with all of you here. As I said, please do keep your questions rolling in on the chat. And I think, Rob, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. And Rob, you'll just need to come off mute. There we
Welcome.
go.
Thanks, John. All this new technology. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. As John said, I've spent many years working with HR solutions, and I'm actually lucky. I mean, I started off with green screen computing, and today we work with mobile solutions. So I've got a lot of experience, and I know where we've come from, and I'm very excited to where we are. Today, I'm going to share some insights on how emerging technologies can make HR more human, as opposed to the perception of being, computers being cold, calculated logic, devoid of any feelings. Today we work in an environment where something we'd never imagined before. The new way of work has been thrust upon us. And what we've been speaking about in the last few years in conferences about this new way of work coming, it's today it's the norm. It's been thrust upon us. And there's no going back. We're not going to get back to the norm. People talk about when I get back to the office, when things return. It's never going to be like that. And in a way, that's very good. We've all had a taste of what it's like to be able to use technology. And a lot of people are going to want to carry on working like this. I know for myself, it's going to be great to carry on working in this sort of environment. From an organization point of view, there's organizations who've been able to adapt very quickly, and they enjoy success with the employees. There are also organizations who are reluctant to change, but don't have an option now. So that's going to be really, really interesting. So I think the overriding message today is really around not being afraid of technology. I think people should be afraid of missing out. What can technology offer organizations? How can they benefit from it? How can it change the lives of their employees? So I like using this slide when we talk about technology and artificial intelligence. I think we've all been programmed to think of Arnold Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. This whole big thing about robots taking over, and then the other side of it is a lot about robots or automation stealing jobs, replacing jobs. And one of the things I like to say is that it's not so much around jobs. It's not so much about people being replaced. It's really around replacing jobs but not replacing people. And it's around organizations having plans in place. And it's really around upskilling your staff and reskilling them. What you don't want is, people with skills will always have work to do. It's when the people's skills become redundant that the organizations face a challenge on what can they do with people, with their staff. So, if we start looking at the reality of artificial intelligence in organizations, most of us have either, played around with Siri or Alexa, Cortana, Google Assistant. Those are technologies we're already familiar with. Those technologies, have already become part of our lives, whether we know it or not. AI is already part of our lives. I know I've started using Netflix in the last couple of months, and Netflix is using that. It's starting to recommend movies based on the patterns of the shows that I watch. I don't find that pervasive, and it's not forcing me to watch anything I don't want to watch. It's basically saying, people who watch the shows that you watched and enjoyed like these shows as well. Here's a recommendation. So, we've got to look at this artificial intelligence in that light. It's not taking over. It's helping us make better decisions. So if we look at, if we look at the role of artificial intelligence, it's really about three primary areas. Augmenting our decision making. So provide me with data to make better decisions. Many years ago, we spoke about HR systems being decision support systems. So as opposed to just using my gut feel and whether that's employing, which is the best candidate, or promotions or transfers, give me information to help me make that. And then let me make decisions faster. If I've got a lot more information, if I'm using things like analytics, it enables me to make faster decisions. Because the bottom line is improving our business capabilities. It's pointless if I have all this technology and it's not changing the way the business actually operates, if it's not becomes more efficient, if it doesn't make the business more sustainable. So the key there is, in the end, is the benefits to the business. Oracle undertook a very interesting survey and found some interesting facts in it. So the survey came out towards the end of last year, early this year, and it was all around people's perceptions. And I mean, I found it quite surprising that 64% of people would trust a robot more than their manager. So those people in the audience today, those managers, it's a startling fact. I mean, I would never have thought about it. And then 82% think people think that robots can do better than their managers. And I think it's really around this whole perception of, for many years, there's been a lot of subjectivity in the workplace, and people are sort of looking towards the whole idea of robots are basing decisions on data, and if the data is good, looking for better decisions. But what I'd like to extract from this is that we don't have this, people are afraid, of robotics or AI or technology in the workplace. So that's a really, really good sign from that perspective. But we mustn't underestimate the value of being human, our humanness. So, what can't be digitized becomes more and more valuable. So creativity, if you look at having creativity in the workplace, people's imaginations, people's intuition, the emotions and empathy, those are all areas where you require people. Computers are very bad at that. And although they can do certain things, it's really based on data. It's really based on pattern tracking. It's all around that, as opposed to, you don't have a PC sitting there beeping and saying, I've come up with a really brilliant idea. It's rather around looking at data, large amounts of data, and then making those recommendations. So what we'll find in organizations is the skill sets required will start changing, where I require skills from people around things like problem solving. We need new products. We need new ideas in the organization. That's where I need people. I need people who are able to actually facilitate that within the organization. And the decisions, once they've made that, and what we then do after that, can be augmented with computing power with AI. So I really like this slide here, which just, what are computers strong at? So if we start looking at things like, we know calculation speed, memorizing. Computers never forget. Why? Because they can store it on a hard drive when flash memory. Computers are really great at multitasking and applying computing and logic. To me, the middle column is very interesting because I see the middle column moving towards the left. So facial recognition on mobile phones today, facial recognition has become really, really good. I'm lucky, I'm lucky I use an iPhone, and even my internet banking now, it's a quick glance of my face and I'm logged into internet banking. I thought it was going to be a real painful experience. Image sorting, those are areas where computers are getting stronger and stronger. But you look at something like a verbal IQ test, a computer's great at things like your multiple choice. But sitting down and actually having a discussion with the person, asking them questions, reading how they're answering the answers, that becomes far and far more difficult. But then we can see where humans are better. So I smiled when I saw this reading facial expressions because, even the robotics are starting to look at that. But again, it's those small things. The whole, for those of you who've ever done teamwork or presentation skills, this whole thing about your body language, crossed arms, smile, mirroring and all that. That's really, really strong stuff from a human perspective. Capacity to learn, you might think, well, computers can learn. Computers can learn based on what's coming in, where, as humans, we've got far more capacity to learn. And then, of course, things like empathy and physical adaptability. Although there's a very scary video on YouTube these days about a robotic dog that its movements almost mimic a dog, the way it runs and sits, etc. So this is where we are today, exclamation mark, but it's changing. But there's certain things we know that, computers aren't going to be really particularly strong at. So for many, we've spoken at many conferences, right here myself, and, we spoke about this new way of work. And there was a lot of time it was, are you ready for it, guys? It's coming, technology is empowering, it's been there. And then the pandemic arrived. And all of a sudden, this new way of work was not so much this futuristic way of how it's going to become. Our new way of work today has become the way of work. So when I started talking about all this new technology and all that, that is how we are working today. It's the new way of work's got to be redefined, and we've got to think about what that's going to be. So the pandemic just put an end to it, and a lot of organizations spoke about, when you speak to them, it's the barriers, the culture of the organization. With the pandemic, all of those barriers disappeared, because if you weren't able to adapt, you didn't really have a way to actually work. So, today we sit in an environment where, from a fourth industrial revolution, what we spoke about, everything, it's here and it's today. And organizations who are adapting or agile enough to adapt to it are those the organizations that are actually benefiting the most. So we'll just take a step back, and I've always liked using this slide. So we all know that this incremental pace of technology, new phones all the time, new PCs, new processing power, hard drives that can have a higher and higher capacity of storing data. But what's happened over the years, and I can refer back to, when I started work, certainly I used to go to the office to use technology. And even today, with all the technology that Oracle can offer me, I still come home to my good technology. And so there's a gap between employees' technology at home and the technology they utilize at the business. And it varies by organization. And, there's a phrase that what you don't want your employees to do is, when they get to work, is to take a step into the past and use old technology. But when they get home, they take the step into the future. So they're using chatbots with internet banking. They are using augmented reality or virtual reality in their gaming mode. They get to the office and they fill out a screen on a leaf form just based on a screen with no intelligence behind it. So there's a huge opportunity here for organizations to close the gap between the employees, technology that they're using currently, and what the business actually offers. The downside to this is organizations who don't do anything, the gap between the technology that's available and business doing nothing, that gap just gets greater and greater. And that's where it starts impacting your employees. People will find it impossible to work in an environment where, for example, I can't use my mobile device to do part of my work. If I can't access my systems via my mobile phone or via an iPad, then it starts inhibiting the way I can work. I don't want to have to come to the PC every time I want to do something. If I quickly want to review something, do a print, answer a question, approve a leave form, I've got my mobile phone with me, irrespective of where I am. I need to be able to impact that. So, organizations are now, with this pandemic, being forced to re-look at the way they do things because they were forced through this, this whole change. So, if we look at what the key shifts are in the workplace, because, seeing how this technology is going to make work more human. So, we talk about reconfiguring of jobs as opposed to losing jobs. Now, if I'm speaking to organizations, I like to say to them, as an organizational strategy, there's a responsibility that lies around this. As an organization, we need to look at, say, what skills are we going to be requiring in the future? Because that is the skill set we need to start empowering our employees with. If an organization doesn't have that sort of strategy, then they start finding themselves with employees who have redundant skills. So it's an organizational responsibility, and this is where we see HR taking that driving seat, being that spokesperson at the boardroom table, taking the lead in this, because it's important to have the right skills. We talk about this right mindset, and that's the culture of the organization. Organizations need to become, a learning culture. I need to have this learning culture in the organization, because it's through a learning and acquiring new skills that gives me as an employee agility. And with my agility, I reduce the stress around uncertainty. So I want this continuous learning to be relevant in the organization. And then this whole thing about, the way learning is done in organizations. Learning before was, I used to talk about learning as, just in case. I got to an organization and I did a whole lot of learning just in case I needed it. So we always did this with our employees. And the new term today is just in time. So I need to do something. I require a set of skills. Let me do just in time. If we look at the way the new generations in the workplace are working, don't send me to a training room for a week. Give me a half an hour burst of training. Give me a 1 hour video to watch. Give me let me pick that up. Let me apply it immediately in my work, that I can actually start using it. And that's the way organizations need to start planning how they are going to plan their learning. So getting back to the slide. So this, the 3 key points are the empathy and the resilience and the innovation. Now, your digital ways of working now matter more than ever before. If we look at it from a pandemic point of view, we spoke about, in the last year, we spoke about these 5 generations being at the workplace. Well, and I wrote a piece about this a while back that was published in the CHRO around, there's actually a new generation R that we're talking about, because it didn't matter whether you're 20 years old or like myself, 60 years old, we all had to start adapting and working in the same way. So we refer to this generation R, this reset. We all had to adapt in order to be able to work in this environment. So if we look at today's environment, we find employees are working harder, and they're expecting, and HR are expected to deliver in new ways. HR isn't an office anymore that I can walk to and that I can go and go and speak to. HR needs to deliver all these services remotely. HR needs to make sure that employees remain productive. That there's a work-life balance and this whole sense of purpose. So, those things are important from an HR point of view to, provide to the organization. So if we look at empathy, there's a big focus around employee engagement. Employee engagement with employees working remotely can be a challenge. if I'm not using the technology, or I don't have the technology that's going to enable it. Yeah, I love the statement about, we all spoke about working from home, and it's now morphed into living at work. And it's a huge, big danger of employees burning out. In fact, you never leave the office. And I don't want employees, you don't want your employees thinking like that. HR needs to be engaging with the employees need to be engaging with their teams, but there's got to have this invisible line, which a lot of people are struggling with, because if my PC is up and running at 6 o'clock in the evening, I get invited to a Zoom meeting where if I wasn't at the office, that meeting wouldn't have happened. So, if we start looking from that perspective, I don't know about you guys, the guys attending this, but I'm all zoomed out. I spend hours and hours and hours in Zoom meetings. I find them incredibly tiring, far more tiring than when I sat in boardrooms in meetings. I don't have coffee chats anymore. I don't go and sit in a canteen for half an hour and have a meal with colleagues. I don't have that any longer. So, yeah, it's a big challenge. And what can HR do about this, to make this whole thing more human, because we're sitting remotely? So there's, things like your chatbots, give me a 24/7 service that if I want to understand what's changed in the leave policy, let me ask a chatbot what that is. I don't have to wait until the next day to speak to somebody in HR. Personalized communications. Something happens where in my area, HR should be aware of it. Through technology, it's quite easy to go and send me a personalized thing to say, Rob, in the area that you work in, we heard that there's an outbreak of something, there's a fire. Are you okay? Is everything all right? All of these things are possible now with new technologies. If we look at resilience, how do we, this whole thing about being resilient? At Oracle, we talk about living in the world of yes. And what does that mean? It's all around organizations having the systems and processes in place that are flexible. Okay, HR needs to be able to adapt on a continual basis, and we've seen now in the last 6 months how quickly things can change and how drastically they can change. Traditionally, HR solutions, were managed by IT, not by HR. So anything I wanted done on the solution, I had to work through IT, and that's not how HR wants to work today. Business wants to take control. If I just think of an example for leave, so we're all working from home. So how important is, if somebody says to me, Rob, you need to take leave, because you might forfeit leave, or is HR going to take it and say, well, actually, based on today's circumstances, we need to review our leave policy. We need to make it more lenient around employees because they're working from home. That needs to be done quickly, and effectively within the organization. It can't be a 6 month, we need to submit a service request to IT and it goes into a queue. So there's a big change in this focus around HR taking control of their solutions. And again, it's through technology they're actually able to do this. So if we look at it, we've got this resilience model, and it's quite interesting to see where, initially, organizations, they mastered steps 1 and 2, the compliance and efficiency. That is quite easily because it was transactional and I was working with data. When we got to step 3 of empowerment, employee and managed self-service, a lot of organizations really embraced this, but they've been stuck there. They haven't moved forward around moving into what we talk about, this whole thing around the experiential, the employee experience being personalized, this intelligence behind the solutions, and then moving into this whole culture of transformation. So, with artificial intelligence, with all this emerging technology, we talk about empowering HR teams, okay, focusing on the human experience. So, you need to understand, as an organization, where's my organization and how are we going to move up this? Because it's by moving up this value chain that I'm actually able to experience or take advantage what technology can offer. So a couple of key points. So technology, it's just an enabler. So, great technology doesn't lead to HR transformation, okay? It's the people. So, I like saying that, when you're moving to cloud type solutions where, your cloud solutions are very strong in utilizing emerging technology, the service provider becomes the vehicle, okay? The driver of the vehicle is the employee. So I need to have really good talent. I need to have talented people in order to get this HR transformation underway. So that's really, really key. Technology itself is not going to achieve it. And when we talk about HR transformation, it's not just about replacing a legacy system with a new one. Replacing systems for the sake of upgrading technology, it's not good enough. There's no business case around it. There's a lot more that needs to change from that perspective. So, you need the right partner. Your partner becomes your vehicle. HR needs to focus around HR. HR shouldn't be focusing around the sort of underpinning technologies. That is what cloud provider like Oracle is able to provide our organizations with. And the whole of the HR transformation, it's when you change the organization, it's all around employing employees. And whether an employee is a manager, a specialist, a technician, it doesn't matter. It's really around empowering employees, enabling employees to take more and more decisions around their career, around employees saying, what careers are available for an organization. It's around using machine learning to say to an employee, based on your current skills profile, here's a couple of roles that you actually got an 80% fit with if you're interested in actually moving into those careers. It's around the system identifying, where the employee against their job profile, what skills they're lacking, and then moving in and saying, pushing learning to that employee, saying, here is some learning that you require to assist you actually in achieving your goals. So it's about HR embracing emerging technologies. Really what you want to do is unlock the employee potential, because you've got this huge employee base. All these employees have potential, but that potential needs to be unlocked. And it's really through using advanced technologies, the strategy of the organization to say around reskilling and upskilling our staff to unlocking this potential, because that is what's going to change the organization. If the organization stays as it is now, they could well get caught, like many organizations got caught, a while back with the whole, online business. We think of, what the impact of Netflix had on DSTV or Airbnb. These are well-documented examples of how traditional organizations weren't prepared to take that step. And, therein lies, the new role of HR. It's all around this empowerment of people. And quite honestly, from an HR perspective in closing, HR people need to understand the value of combining people, data, and machines. And they need to have a good understanding of that. By not understanding that, they're not going to be able to play a really good value-adding role within HR. And that's my talk. Thank you very much. I don't know if there's any questions come through that we can look at. John, I'll hand back over to you that we can carry on.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob. I really liked what you said about as HR professionals, of course, we need to be comfortable and confident with technology, but that shouldn't ultimately be our role. We should be focusing on HR and allowing systems like Oracle to handle the kind of the techie and the challenging processes. So I like that. And then you'll notice in the chat, we've had a couple of comments there rather than questions. So Alan Pascoe is saying that they've embarked on an RPA journey and just speaking to the value that is had from implementing RPA within our organizations. And then Mokadi also made some interesting comments around both the continuous learning through obviously having, I guess, a little bit more free time as it relates to adopting tech. And then there was also a question, and you mentioned this earlier around the chatbots, et cetera, where Mokadi was asking about, do the systems that we design to value people end up possibly devaluing them or maybe coming up with their own kind of negative criteria, perhaps?
So the first thing from the chatbot, really what that's doing from an HR point of view is saying, guys, we can provide you with a 24/7 service. Chatbots it's using artificial intelligence technology. So it's learning all the time. It's learning what questions are being asked, what answers to be given. What it's taken away is technology. I can take my phone, I can speak the question and I can hear the answer. I can basically start this conversation. And what it is it's this whole thing around, I always say line managers didn't like getting involved with line HR. Their performance management, career succession planning, they didn't like that. They didn't really feel skilled and they didn't have a mechanism to do it. So it was a pain. Okay. Line managers had to be told by HR, guys, it's your 6-month review with your employees, please make sure you do it. They didn't see the value of it. By bringing this technology in, what you want line managers is actually, if I start using this technology, I'm going to have better skilled employees, more motivated employees. And then you start having this engaged workforce, because when your manager starts doing that for you, it changes the whole concept of, the old way of doing things with this whole subjective way of you're a 1, 2, or 3, and that's it from a performance perspective.
Okay, thanks, Rob. So working, definitely still working harder, but definitely working a lot smarter is what I take away from that. Thanks, Rob. That was really great. And during our live Q&A towards the last 10 minutes of our session, I'd definitely like to rope you back in to address some of the questions that we'll be receiving in the chat. So I want to thank you for your very informative session there. And I'm now going to invite Queen Mokonoto, who, as I mentioned earlier, is the HR director at Oracle. And Queen has also been working in the HR space for well over 20 years. So we are definitely in for a treat for lots of awesome insights and tips. And Ronnie, I'm going to ask you to turn your camera on as well. Ronnie is the HCM Sales and Development Strategy Leader for Africa, also over at Oracle, been with Oracle for over 16 years. And let's just say been working in the HR and tech space for a few more years after that. So welcome to the session. Great to have you both here.
Thank you, John.
Perfect. And we've passed the first test because we're not on mute. So that's a really good start. Queen, I'd like to open up the floor and ask you the first kind of question. I know that in lots of the engagements that I've personally had with Oracle in the past, and being a very tech strong company, I would just like to find out from you, with regards to your HR processes and the sort of systems that you have in place. We know that right now at the moment, during sort of COVID and the corona pandemic and lockdown, we've all been presented with incredible challenges. I'd be very interested to hear how your world has changed over the last few kind of weeks and months.
And yeah, thank you, John. I'm to be honest with you, I was listening to Rob talking about all of the technology that we have, and I was so excited, feeling that the technology that he's referring to really helped us now with the move from working from home with the COVID-19. I think from the 16th of March, all Oracle employees had to move from the office to work from home. And to be honest with you, within 24 hours, we are all operational, we are all working. And what really helped us or enabled us to really operate within that 24 hours was all of the technology that we have, which I see it as an engine, because as HR, if you don't have very good technology, you don't have an engine. And if you don't have a good engine with every vehicle, then you cannot move. And I can just maybe, for example, give examples of where I've seen that our technology becoming more successful. But at the same time, what we had to do really during that time, we had to empathize with our employees. We have to look at how we become supportive towards our employees, as well as how we become sensitive, because with the impact of COVID-19, it had an impact on individuals, it had impact on their work, as well as it had an impact on them working from home with their families.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Queen.
And I think,
yeah.
Sorry, yeah. I think from our side, going back to what Rob was saying earlier, it's all about the combining the empathy, resilience, and innovation. And having all of that capability within the Oracle world has just made things so much better for us. It really became, a second nature. You didn't even think about the fact that we were transitioning from being at the office to actually living at work or working from home, as Rob put it a little bit earlier. So it's interesting.
Perfect. Thanks, Ronnie. And then the next question would be addressed to you. I know that you've obviously been with Oracle for some time now, and I'm interested to hear a little bit more about when Oracle sort of embarked on this digital strategy. And perhaps as a sort of follow-up to that, perhaps you can mention about some of the organizations that Oracle has acquired over the years, with the likes of PeopleSoft and Hyperion and some of the others, and how that has kind of changed the transition from the former Oracle to where you are today.
So it's actually interesting, and it was quite exciting to be right at the start of this journey. As you mentioned earlier, I joined Oracle back at the end of 2004, and it was really at the time of the acquisition of PeopleSoft. So I was a PeopleSoft employee and moved across to Oracle as part of that acquisition. But the whole acquisition was really, from an Oracle perspective, the start of our journey or our transformation into this digital world. And the way we did it, you mentioned, the acquisitions, the PeopleSoft acquisition, Siebel, et cetera, et cetera. The point of our transition was we saw the need to move into a digital world, a cloud world, and we needed to relook at how we as Oracle were delivering technology to people, and how we foresaw the need to change that. So the acquisitions that we made were really to acquire the IP that we needed to build this new cloud technology, this digital technology that we actually have. So Larry at the time went out and looked for the leading human capital management solution, which in those days was PeopleSoft, and he bought that. He looked at the top CRM application. Siebel was the top at that stage. He bought that. And the idea was to get all of the IP of all of the top organizations around technology and use that to build what we now refer to as our superset of applications that really drive business, and developing it almost from the ground up as a cloud technology. So it became a very different thing. And from a business perspective, it became a completely different way of doing business, where traditionally we were an on-premise perpetual license vendor. We now became a software as a service vendor where it works on a subscription basis. So internally, it was a transition as a result of the technology that we went through as well.
Okay. And I think what I really value and appreciate about the Oracle story is there's lots of organizations that provide a software service or a solution to clients and to partners, yet often or very rarely adopt their own technology or their own solution within their business. And I know even from conversations with your CFO, Anis, he mentioned that the transition prior to lockdown and during lockdown was almost eventless, because everything had been prepared, everything was planned, and there wasn't much of a hiccup in between. I think the biggest hurdle was something like arranging data contracts and things like that for employees who were at home. But because everything is kind of in the cloud, it was such a smooth and such an easy transition. So yeah, really, really appreciate that you all practice what you preach.
And it's actually very important that people understand that because of the ability to transact in a cloud world, it doesn't really matter where you are. If I'm at the office, great. If I'm not at the office, I can pick up my phone and I can connect to whoever it is, wherever it is. We, as Rob said, have Zoom meetings and Teams meetings and Skype meetings, and it's just become a way of life for us. And whether you don't even think about the fact that the technology is there all the time supporting you in whatever it is that you need to do. You just connect without thinking about it.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Ronnie. Queen, the next question is going to be addressed for you. And it sounds like at Oracle, because we have all the technology and all the systems in place, things are obviously relatively straightforward and relatively smooth. One of the questions that came in was from Melanie Isaacs. And the question that she was asking is, how do we teach our staff to remain positive during these times, and especially when it's directly related to their work? So what are some of the things that you've done, and maybe how is some of the tech that you're using enable that as well?
Okay. That is a very good question, because from HR side, it's very important to support employees being empathetic. What we have done, we engaged our employees using our employee assistant program, making sure that we had events or meetings on a weekly basis where we shared, for example, issues around anxiety, issues around working from home, looking at multitasking or multi-skilling, as well as upskilling, and also making sure that employees are comfortable at home. And we also used, for example, we use Zoom, and also another important thing as well, to make sure employees are comfortable is the speed of decision making or speed of approvals. If anything needs to be approved, and if you have a system where people can approve things quicker, it also helps. The employee assistant program also helped. And also looking at the Zoom meetings that we had on a weekly basis, it also helped because it's balancing the technology as well as the human part of being part of HR and supporting the employees as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Queen. I'm just going to go ahead and open up a poll for us here quick. So you'll notice over on the right-hand side of our screen in the chat, you'll see a poll question overlay there now. And quite simply, what we're trying to find out is, have you considered using cloud tech in HR? So of course, if you are currently using tech, you can go ahead and select yes. If you're yet to embark on this journey, perhaps Excel is your best friend, you can go ahead and select no. So we'll just wait for some of those responses to come in. Okay, a few of those coming in already. Excellent. We'll give you about another 20 seconds to formulate your answers there, and then we'll get some more questions across to Queen and Ronnie. Okay, looks like the responses are slowing down a little bit. Okay, so this is not, well, it's not a huge shock, but it's a reassuring response here. So we can see that 80% of our audience are either currently or have considered using cloud technology in HR. So that's good to hear. And
I'm certainly happy about that.
yeah, exactly. Let's hope they're all using Oracle too. Ronnie, the next question is for you. And what I'd like to find out from you, you've obviously got, you've had an incredible and a lengthy journey over at Oracle. And I'd like to know how's the current situation affected the pandemic and how you go about doing things at Oracle today. We've heard a little bit about the fact that it hasn't been too much of a bumpy ride. Things have been relatively smooth in the transition, but I'd love to hear a little bit more from you on that, please.
Sure. So I think Queen's talked about, what we, from an internal perspective, have experienced as a result of this. We've been talking about this fourth industrial revolution for ages and ages, and people just said, yes, it's a fad and it'll go away, and it's, not something that we really need to be concerned about. What we've seen now, with COVID coming in earlier this year, basically what it's done is it's accelerated the change that Rob was talking about. He was talking about exponential change in technology. We have seen this being accelerated unbelievably, where people have realized that in order for me to be able to continue to succeed, there's no way that I can carry on the way I've always done before. So we experienced it internally from an Oracle perspective. And fortunately for us, the ride was not as bumpy as it has been for some organizations. If you think about organizations in transportation, in leisure industry, restaurants and things like that, they've really, really taken a knock. What's been interesting for us is, and I think Rob touched on it when he was doing his presentation, is this whole concept of repurposing. And what we're seeing with a lot of organizations is exactly that, where they're looking at, I was talking to somebody in Nairobi the other day, and they were saying a lot of the hotels there who are currently unable to take guests because of the whole lockdown that they have there, have effectively looked at their business and said, well, we have a lot of rooms, we have catering facilities. So they've repurposed themselves into makeshift hotels where hospitals rather, where you can go in, people can be isolated in their rooms. You have catering facilities. You have the ability to bring doctors in and have them working there. So really they looked at it and said, how do we take advantage, not necessarily take advantage of the pandemic, but how do we repurpose ourselves? And I think organizations need to, Rob was talking about innovation. It's not just innovation in technology, it's innovation in how we do business. And having that adaptability is key. And again, if you have the technology in place, it allows you to have that flexibility and that adaptability where you can very, very quickly change direction and purpose going forward. So that's been interesting.
Okay, thanks, Ronnie. Yeah, I think if there's anything that lockdown and the corona pandemic has taught us, it's definitely to be adaptable and to kind of make the most of the situations that we find ourselves in. So thank you.
Absolutely.
If there's any additional questions for Ronnie and Queen, please go ahead and type them in the chat now. I've got one or two more questions I'd like to address to the two of you. And then, Rob, I'm going to invite you to come back on camera and address some of the other questions that we'll be getting in. Queen, was there anything that you wanted to add to the repurposing within the organization, or are you comfortable with what Rob and Ronnie have shared there?
What I would like to add, and more especially for the HR practitioners, what is key is to partner with business and understand where the business is going, as well as to understand the skills that are needed for future in your business. And once you understand that, it makes it easier to repurpose, to reskill, to develop the team, as well as to ensure that you understand the skill set, as well as the talent that you have within the business. And once you have all that information, I think we're using the technology. We use HCM. I'm able to know exactly the talent that I have in the business. I know where people are or what career path they need. I also have the succession and development at the tip of my fingertips because of all the technology that I have. And I will encourage all HR practitioners to have the same information.
Okay, perfect. Queen, that actually leads me to another question for you specifically. So, of course, from your time being at Oracle, you would have used the Oracle technology and the systems. With organizations that you worked at and for previously, how does the usability or the ease of use with the current Oracle technologies and the HCM platform compare and make your life easier compared to some of the other platforms or tech that you were using in the past?
To be honest with you, HCM is brilliant, and not really putting other technology or shaming other technology. I've used Workday before. It's difficult to use if you have to plug it into other technologies or systems. And I also used SuccessFactors as well. It's not user friendly. You cannot talk. It cannot talk to you. It cannot really guide you. But then when you use HCM, normally it's plugged on the Oracle platform, and all the information comes from Oracle platform. All the information is easily accessible, and if you are using cloud, and you can be able to see the entire organization at a snapshot. For example, we have 130,000 employees worldwide. I can be able to see all those employees. If I need approvals, everything runs smoothly. So it's a I love it, and I hope I'm not being biased because I work for Oracle, but I find that is the best system and is the best technology, as long as employees can be able to adapt, the line managers adapt, and HR use it effectively, is the best solution ever for HR to partner with the business.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Rob, I'm going to invite you to come back on camera here. We've received a couple of questions in the chat. Let me just make our cameras a little bit smaller there so we can squeeze in the top. Okay, perfect. You can decide who's going to respond to this. So Pumzile Wesi, I didn't get the organization which you're joining us from, but your question was, are organizations at a point of addressing technology versus generational differences? So the example was around baby boomers, and this is how we do things. No need to change things without eliminating them out of the organization whilst still gaining their rich knowledge. So I guess if I was to shorten and condense that, how is technology enabling or enhancing the generational gaps within our organization? Is there resistance? Are people open to change? Does it make our lives easier?
Okay, so
Rob,
John,
do you want to have first go at that? You have first go?
So, I mean, the whole idea is what we've tried to do is to say the technology needs to fit into the current lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Okay, whether I'm 60 years old or I'm 20 years old starting my career, today mobile is the key. Everybody's doing everything via mobile. Okay. You know, when I spoke about learning, I need to be able to do my organizational learning on my mobile phone. I need to apply for leave, look at a leave policy. I need to do some career planning. When I start doing that, I start crossing those barriers. And that's the key. I mean, how are people living today? I mean, everybody's on, it's either the Facebooks, the Instagram, the WhatsApps. That is how our technology needs to look and work, because that's what people are working with today. And it becomes seamless. And the whole idea is, by being intuitive, nobody went on WhatsApp training, nobody went on Facebook training. Why would it not be? Could it not be the same for an HR solution? And that's what Oracle has done with redeveloping the solution in a cloud base. Sorry, Ronnie, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, so I was just saying, and I think you touched on it in your presentation as well when you were talking about Generation R. If you think about just from a personal perspective, my father-in-law is 80 odd years old and was very averse to technology. He never worked with it in his working environment. He had a far more manual type of job, that hands-on type of work, and never really got involved in technology. And as you say, today he's on his smartphone, he's going on WhatsApp, he's doing Zoom, Skype calls and things like that. So it's not as if it's now something that is only for the new generation, and because they are the ones that have grown up with this technology, it's almost exclusive to them. That's absolutely not the case at all. My wife, by the same token, is an accountant, and she, for many years, used to write down and on a piece of paper all of her accounts and balance her accounts on a piece of paper. And I always used to say to her, this is what Excel is designed to do. It's to help you to do those things. And she was very, very fearful of technology. And about 5 years ago, I bought her an iPad and I said, here it is, just play with it, go onto Facebook and whatever the case may be. In the last 3 years, she has not entered a physical bank. She does all of her banking online. For somebody that was completely averse to technology, using a pen and a piece of paper to do your calculations, that transformation has happened. And I think the point that Rob made is that it has become intuitive. You don't need to go on training to use a tablet or a smartphone. Sure. I remember the first tablet that I got. I opened up the box, took out the charger, took out the tablet, and I looked inside and I said, these stupid people forgot to put an instruction manual in there. How am I going to work with this thing? And the reality is, when you switch it on, it says to you, let's get started. And you don't need to have, it's intuitive. And I think that's key.
Perfect. Rob and Ronnie, thank you very much for that. I see we are fast approaching the time. Okay, well, let's see. Portia's just posted a question there. Okay, that's going to be quite an interesting one. Queen, perhaps you can get us started on this one. So Portia Sitol is asking, with the pandemic, onboarding new hires has been a challenge. How has Oracle leveraged technology to enhance the onboarding or induction process and procedures? To make it, I would imagine, easier or simpler.
That is a very good question, and our Oracle systems has been very brilliant regarding recruitment. So what we do, Portia, our recruitment is done electronically. It's done electronically. We appoint employees. I don't even get to see them, but I get the workflow and appoint them, approve the appointment. We do onboarding online, all our onboarding. For example, we just appointed 56 graduates, and all those graduates, they've never been into Oracle Office. All of them were onboarded electronically. All of them were appointed electronically. All of them got their documentation and everything electronically. The only thing that we had to ship to them or give them, it was a laptop, where we had to go deliver laptops, or they had to come collect laptops. Everything, even the training, was done on the system. I only saw them on Zoom, just greeting them and just welcoming them. But the onboarding process is seamless when using our systems.
I think just to add to that, when Oracle designed the solution, basically from looking for a job right through to onboarding is all done via a mobile phone.
Okay.
So our onboarding starts on acceptance of job offer, not on day one. So an employee, the 30-day notice, they can already start providing information for medical aid, for pension, doing compliance training. They can do all of that, and it's all done via their mobile phone.
Okay.
So one of the things that I enjoy doing is understanding and identifying trends that are happening. And what we're seeing from a recruitment perspective, especially now in the COVID era, is this whole concept of video interviewing. if you think about the new generation, they don't like writing up a CV or a resume, but they're very comfortable in front of a camera and doing an interview that way. So we're starting to see that as a trend, from a hiring perspective. The other thing that we're doing from an induction and a learning perspective is to start introducing virtual reality, where as part of the induction, you can have a virtual walkthrough of the office, know where Queen's office is, know where the IT department is to arrange your laptop, know where security is to get your badge, et cetera, and it's all done through virtual reality. So we're starting to look at things like that from a trends perspective. One of the other trends that we're starting to see happening is this whole concept of gamification around the recruiting process. So, and Queen will probably testify to the fact that the best candidates are people that are being referred to you from other people, because they're going to give you probably the better reference on there. So, but a lot of people are reluctant to make these recommendations. So as soon as you start incorporating some form of gamification in there, where people can win tokens or whatever it is that you're going to do to encourage them to make recommendations, it's surprising how people are now starting. I think by nature are very competitive. So, people are looking to say, well, how can I get the additional tokens? How do I get a fancy golf shirt like Rob is wearing? And things like that. It's bringing that gamification into the workplace as part of an engagement process in there. So these are some of the trends that we're seeing coming down the line, which are very, very interesting.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Ronnie. And as we can see on our slide here, there's various different solutions within the Oracle stable or suite of tools. And it always amazes me how fast 60 minutes goes by. So I see we are fast approaching the hour. So I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us here today. I'm sure you're probably wondering what is the next installment of the HR Indaba Network webinars. So let's go ahead and get that up for us here on our screen now. All right, so we can see next week we'll be joined by some additional HR leaders. So we'll have Crystal Coleman, who's the MD of Elite Wealth, Assets and Insurance, Santaswa Fubu, who's the Group Executive of Human Capital over at Barlow World, and then we'll have Fiona Lepan, who's one of the directors at Cliff Decker Hoffmeyer, and they'll be discussing a very important and very relevant topic around the recent Me Too movement. And they'll be discussing what HR should do and what HR can do to support that movement. So once again, I would like to thank our CHRO community for joining us for another installment and another session of the HR Indaba Network webinar. I'd like to thank you, Queen, Rob, and Ronnie, for your really interesting and awesome insights in today's webinar. And for those of us who answered, or rather asked a couple of questions in the chat, and we didn't get around to answering them, or perhaps in the pre-registration questions as well, we'll be sure to get those responses over to you within the next 24 hours. So again, thank you all for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you, Queen, Robbie, and Ron.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, everybody.
Cheers for now.
Well, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Cheers.